first step is you just create your own clean browser environment for that. So it's very important. Majority, I think, will use Microsoft Edge. That's mostly connected to your work account if you're using a work laptop. And that might interfere if you don't want to use Dataverse in your work account. If you want to have a dedicated training environment, then obviously just do and follow the steps in part 1. In part 2, then you're obtaining your training license. So there are 2 ways how to do this. Number 1, which is the preferred option, is create your own so-called Power Apps developer plan. With that Power Apps developer plan, you are able to get your own dedicated environment if you're not blocked by your IT. If you're blocked by your IT, then, well, that happens. I've seen that several times. Last year during the Microsoft tour in Frankfurt, I've seen a few people have been blocked by the company, by the governance, so they couldn't do it. But if you can do it, obviously it's great. You're just getting enough capacity, especially for this training, but also build, your own Dataverse model where you can later build on your own Power App, for example, as well, or some kind of automation with Power Automate as well. And if that doesn't work for you, then I'm prepared as well. So in that case, that's only the option for if you want to do the training, but there's nothing else possible for you to create. I've created 24 accounts in that case. So if you just go in here, so then you will see that you do have 24 accounts. Do me a favor, don't delete the naming in that case. What you do is if you just go to this, just put your name into the bracket. So everyone just knows that is now taken by that specific person. So then that's easier that, not 2 people are just getting this one, So I would say that's also a way. If there's not so many people today there, maybe then we can just, save you some time and you just take this one. But this is only available for this day to day, or this week. But after this, then I will just, shut down the environment. So if you want to work longer, so in that case, it's then better if you just take the other one. So in that case, let me go in here and I give you 2 minutes now time that you just go step by step to this. If you have any kind of questions, please let us know in the chat. So there is not really so much demo today in that lab, but in the upcoming labs, of course. And by the way, if you're just asking what your password is for this one, for the environments, workshop 2026. So if you just take this one, then you do get your access to it. If you get your access to it, be sure you're also selecting the right environment, but I come to this a bit later. Good. So how many people have created their own environments, and how many people or have their own environments already, and how many people are just taking the labs here? So as I can see, no names here. So usually that happens in lifetime. I assume that no one is just really taking this account in that case. So good. Then everyone, I assume, has his or her own account in that case. That's great. Alrighty, good. I would say let's go now with the next one. And now we really starting now into our training. And our training is about the data model and solutions. Well, if you have heard about the concept of solution, that's great, but maybe there's one other thing you just don't know about, or maybe you haven't heard about this one. So, well, you have an environment, so your clients just comes and wants, work with that. So it's typically the production environment where people are working with that. But if they want to work, obviously you can't develop at the same time. I hope I never will see again that someone is really doing live development on a production environment anymore, because I've seen that so many times in my life. And I can tell you that never ended good, never. So even doing live fixes on a production is not really something I would really recommend, because it doesn't make any sense. So just imagine you do have a company with 500 people, and let's say they're committed and they want to work with a solution with a Power App, for example, you just have provided. And Dataverse is, the way working, backbone of that. But if you find any kind of a mistake, an error, and you want to fix it, or maybe you just want to extend that with new features, you just can't do that in a production environment. Because then what you're doing is, especially if you're just trying to find out a mistake which is not clear, then you just try to debug. And based on that, you're slowing down, or even you stop processes on a production environment. People can't work anymore. That's super if you want to destroy a lot of revenues on one day on client side, but obviously that's not what we want. We want reliability there. We want to be a trustful partner. Obviously, we don't do this. So we need at least a second environment. Perfectly, you do have this typical strategic three environments: a so-called development environment, a so-called test environment, and a so-called production environment. And you need to, obviously, in a development environment, you just develop what the client is asking you for. In a test environment, you're just testing together with the client, because a client can't test on a development environment, because that's your own environment where, and while the client is testing, you never know when the client has time to test. You still continue with a workload from Jira or Confluence or DevOps or whatever you're just using, your backlog. Based on that, obviously on dev, no one should test, only on test. Why we do have a test environment? Because before we really go into the production, someone have to, from the client side, to give a thumbs up and say, yes, now it's good, now we can really deploy this to production. And that kind of deployment mostly happening automatically today with pipelines in Power Platform. But before we come to this, we need something, a technology, how we can transport this kind of so-called components which we're developing. And that's what is called solutions. And that ALM here stands for Application Lifecycle Management. That means if you automate these things, that at the end it's just only a click where all that kind of things been exported from a development environment into a test environment, or exported out from a test environment to a production environment, at the end. So that is usually the cycle, how it at the end goes. So in that case, that's what LMS and that's what solutions are for. Solution can contain a lot of so-called components. That can be tables, columns, forms, views, apps, but it can also be Power Automate flows. It can also be now Copilot Studio agents, for example. It can be environment variables. It can be a lot. A lot of these components are also called artifacts. can be transported now with solutions. And that's why the solutioning concept is really nice. And that's why Dataverse is becoming more and more important, not only in the Power Platform, but also, with Copilot Studio, which is still, some kind of Power Platform, where I don't see that necessarily only Power Platform only, because it can be used, from everyone, but that's a different topic. And what's very important is that solutions do only contain metadata and not really business data. And that's one of the huge mistakes, clients are doing when we have a workshop. There is never a way of how you transport, millions of the records in one single solution. That's not really doing it, So someone just asking for the password. The password is workshop 2026. So Mirko, if you just write that down, I think that I would be helpful. Good. So in that case, the very, very important, you're really not using any kind of business data there in your solutions. It's really about how your table has been built, how your columns have been, in the tables, how they've been arranged somewhere in forms and views. Not WhatsApp 2026. That will be also a cool workshop 2026 is the password.